Thanks. I'm so excited, Erin.
All right, I'm so excited too. So the first thing I'm going to do is wash my hands, and then I'll be right back with you. Alrighty, so we're going to work on making the avocado chocolate mousse. I was telling Fauzia this earlier. I discovered this recipe when I bought a bunch of avocados to make guacamole with, and when I cut them open, some of them were brown. And so I just Googled what to do with brown avocados because they still tasted fine. They just looked really unappetizing. And so I found this recipe. It's really simple. It's just avocados, cocoa powder, and sweetener and vanilla. And so we're gonna make it first. And these are actually very nice avocados, almost too nice for making this, but that's okay. You can either make this in a food processor. Should I tilt it down a little so y'all can see what I'm doing now? Is that good? Here we go. So you can either make this in a food processor, or you can do it with a hand mixer, or if you're really patient and strong, you can just do it by hand with a fork and a whisk as you would with guacamole. You do want to make sure that the avocados are very ripe and soft. And you can top it with whatever you like. Tonight, I'm going to use strawberries and tamari almonds. So they'll be a little sweet and a little salty. I've also used coconut. It's really delicious with raspberries. And the other thing you can do is, just tilt that up a little bit, is you can make a crust for it. So I've made it into a pie before, which is also really good. You just process dates and nuts and coconut in a food processor until you have kind of a sticky goo, and you push it into a pie tin and let it chill. And then you can put the avocado mousse on top of it and let that chill, and it makes a really yummy pie. But for tonight, we're just going to keep it simple. So our 2 avocados are in there. I'm just going to give my hands a quick rinse because they're greasy. Anybody else have any good tips for using avocados? Like any other dessert type of things that you've made with them? No?
In Kenya, a lot of avocados grow naturally in people's backyards. And we had these very, very juicy, large, meaty ones. And we used to just blend them with condensed milk.
Ooh.
And have it like dessert all the time. The first time I realized that we can have avocados savory is when we came here to the United States. We had always had them sweet, and then we put it in the freezer. It's like half frozen.
Yeah.
And then we put crushed ice over it and have it as dessert.
Wow, that sounds delicious.
Mm-hmm. And being a tropical climate, it was always welcome at the end of the day.
Yeah. With the sweetened condensed milk, Fauzia, does it turn kind of light yellow or does it stay pretty green?
It's paler green.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just put as much as you want to be sweetened. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of, if it's too thick, then we just dilute it with a little regular milk, and sometimes we add a pinch of vanilla, and it's amazing.
Yeah, the vanilla is really key too. We're going to put vanilla in this tonight, and I've made it without it when I was out of vanilla. And it's much better with it. The other thing that's good if you want to try something a little different is peppermint oil. So I've put peppermint oil in it before. I made like chocolate peppermint pudding. Sorry, my honey's a little thick is what's going on here. There we go. And you can use any sweetener in this. So if you're vegan, you could use maple syrup. I've also used agave. If you use agave, you're going to want to use a little more because it's not quite as sweet. I like using the honey because it's nice and thick, and so it retains a really nice thick texture. Oh my gosh, have people attended other cooking classes yet? Monica just did one, right, on soup?
No, this is my first class.
Excellent. Okay, so we put in the honey, and now I'm going to put in the maple syrup. And like I said, you can kind of use whatever sweetener you want. I was a little short on honey, so I'm going to put in a little bit more maple syrup. And we're going to put in our cocoa powder. I've also used cacao powder before. It's a little less chocolatey, so more of the avocado flavor comes through, which didn't really appeal to me, but a lot of recipes call for it, so I know a lot of people like it. So we're just going to put in a 1/4 cup of cocoa powder. And then here comes our delicious, amazing vanilla. I'm a fan. That's going to be a 1/2 teaspoon. Then we're going to put in a tiny pinch of salt. The salt isn't necessary, but it just gives it a little deeper flavor. So I'm just going to sprinkle in a little bit. And I'm just going to scrape down the sides. You usually will have a little bit of a cocoa powder is going to sort of kick up on the edges, and you want to just scrape it down. Oh my gosh, it smells so good. Is anyone else making it right now? Yeah. Okay, so very important to taste it and adjust. If it doesn't taste good, you want to add something to make it taste better. So I'm going to taste mine. And if you're making it along with me, I encourage you to taste yours too. Mine could be a little tiny bit sweeter. So I'm going to put in just a little bit more honey if I can coax it out of this jar.
I do have a question if I can.
Go for it, Marcy.
So I don't have a large food processor,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't have a large food processor, but I do have a large blender.
Uh-huh.
Do you think that you can make this in a blender, or do you think it really needs to have that low blade?
I don't think you can make it in a blender. I think you do a lot better with a hand mixer.
Okay, that's a good advice. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to put my honey in the microwave for just a moment. I'll be right back. And I just wanted to say this about anything that you're cooking. I learned to cook mostly just from trial and error. And so I think it's really important to taste as you go along, and you'll sort of get a feel for what it needs, if it's not sweet enough, or if it needs a little more salt. All right. Monica, did you try yours yet?
I haven't tried it yet because it's just blending now. I'm
Okay.
gonna grab it and give it a taste in just a second.
Just putting in a little bit more honey. Mine's almost perfect.
Wow, this texture is something else.
It's good, right?
It's amazing.
It's very thick and creamy. Okay, mine's perfect. So after you have a taste that you like, you can put it into little serving bowls like that. This makes enough for 4 little bowls. So I wouldn't recommend serving this just for 2 people. You could make it with just 1 avocado if it's a pretty good size one for 2 people. because a whole avocado is a lot of avocado. And so I might suggest putting it in 4 little bowls. I have 2 larger bowls here today, so that's what I'm going to use. And you want to kind of serve it, like I said, you could either make it into like little puddings like this with nuts and fruit, which is what we're going to do tonight, or you could put it in a pie crust, like a made pie crust that you wouldn't want to bake this in the oven. But it's nice to just put it in little bowls and then decorate the top. And while you're putting it in, you kind of want to look and just make sure it's well blended. If you have any spots where the cocoa powder didn't get mixed in, you'd want to blend it until it's nice and smooth. And I'll also say this is a fairly healthy recipe in terms of the amount of sugar in it. And so if it doesn't taste good to you, if it's not sweet enough, you can add more sweetener to it. Sometimes when I cook for people who are used to eating like regular chocolate pudding, this might taste a little healthier than they're used to. And so you can kind of adjust it to taste whatever tastes good to you. But it's kind of a nice way to have a treat without too much sugar. Okay, so I'm just gonna put these in the freezer and we're gonna let them chill. If I was gonna serve this, I would grab a paper towel and wipe the edge so it's nice and smooth and pretty. So I would encourage you to do that if you're making this for someone special that you want to impress. So I'll throw these in the freezer. Any questions about anything I just did? Or any comments or thoughts? No? It's, as you can see, it's a very simple recipe. So this is something you could make really quickly and easily. Just going to do a little tidying up and then we'll move on to the next recipe.
Just one question.
Yes, please.
Is the flavor different if you're using a browned avocado?
Not really, not noticeably to me. That was kind of the beauty of it, is that the cocoa powder is so strong that it kind of, you know how brown avocados can kind of get a funky flavor? To me, the cocoa powder covers it, so you can't really notice. So this is kind of my go-to thing to do if I cut open an avocado. I mean, the avocado still has to taste fairly good. You know how sometimes if they're really too far gone, if they're too far gone and they have an off flavor, I don't think you can fix that. But if they're just a little bit going, yeah.
And have you tried it with, say, cacao?
I have, and it's not quite as rich of a flavor as the cocoa powder. So I think you can taste the avocado taste a little more, which I don't think is bad necessarily. It's just not as chocolatey, but you totally can use cacao powder. Yeah, the original recipe that I found, that's what they used.
Thank you.
Yeah. All righty, let me just do a little move in and rinse it, and then I'll be right back with you. And if anyone else is making it, it'll give you a little time to finish up.
Erin, I have my mind starts immediately like saying, ooh, could you add a banana? That might be a nice flavor. Some cinnamon might be really nice. Like I'm thinking of all kinds of things, and I'm wondering if you've tried different variations other than you mentioned the peppermint.
I've done peppermint and I've done cinnamon, but I've never added banana. Banana would be a great way to make it sweeter without adding more refined sugar. Bananas are really, really sweet. And I don't know if any of you have ever made ice cream out of bananas. You basically can just blend bananas in a food processor with whatever flavor you want and put it in a little dish and freeze it, and it tastes very close to ice cream. So yeah, I think adding a banana would probably be wonderful.
Actually, when I have my smoothies, my banana is my base. So I always add avocado to my banana. Then like you say, I don't have to add any sweetener or sugar at all. One banana and one small avocado is just perfect.
All right, I think we're ready to move on to making the squash pie. Does anybody object to that or have more questions or need more time on this? Monica says she's good. All right, I'm gonna reposition the camera so it's over the stove. And this is going to be a little tricky for me to show you what I'm doing. So I think I'll move that a little closer. That's pretty good. And then I'll just bend down and say hi when I need to. So the most important part of this, what we're going to do now is you need to use either a cast iron skillet or you need to use a glass baking dish. So if you're going to cook it on the stove, but you don't have a pan that can go in the oven, you want to be sure and have your glass baking dish on the side so that you can put your pastry in there when it's time to do that. What I love about this recipe, if you do have a cast iron pan, is that you can just make it all in here. So we're going to saute the vegetables in here, then put them in a separate bowl. Then I'm going to wash the pan out, and then we're going to assemble the pie in here. So it's kind of just like a one pan kind of thing, which is nice. So I'm going to go ahead and start the stove. And tonight I'm going to use coconut oil to fry the vegetables. I had never had vegetables fried in coconut oil until I went to a friend's house, and it's really good. Olive oil works exactly the same. So if you don't have coconut oil, don't go out and buy it just for this recipe. But if you ever are curious, it tastes really, really good. It actually adds a really lovely flavor. All right, so we're just going to heat up the coconut oil in the pan. We're going to do this over medium heat. And I have my onions all ready to go. So I just chopped them up. I don't know if you can see that. Just chop them up kind of not finely, but just kind of in small pieces. So I'm just waiting till the oil's getting nice and sort of shimmering and hot. And you can see if it's hot enough by just dropping in one piece and seeing if it starts frying. This oil's not quite hot enough, but it's getting there. Can you hear it? Starting to sizzle. Okay, so we'll go ahead and pour those in. I have just a little piece of onion skin in there that I'm going to pick out. We'll just fry that. You're cooking along with, I wish you were here actually, so you could smell how wonderful the coconut oil and onions smell together. It's so delicious. We're just going to cook these onions until they get nice and soft and translucent, and then we're going to add the garlic. Some people, when they're cooking onions and garlic, they add them at the same time, but garlic has a tendency to burn, and so I would recommend doing the onions first. Sorry, I was just trying to read something in the chat. For those of you who haven't been to this space that I'm in, this is the Grub Farmhouse. So Grub is a program in Olympia that works with youth. They have an education program here, and they also build gardens for community members. And this beautiful kitchen is part of their farmhouse, and they let the co-op use it for classes. And pre-COVID, we taught a lot of cooking classes here. But I think this is the first streaming one. Is that right, Monica?
Well, the first one from the Grub Farmhouse.
Yeah.
Unless they're doing it, they might be. I'm not sure, but yeah, I streamed my class from my kitchen, and that was the first co-op class we've had on Zoom.
Did you teach it from your own kitchen?
Yeah, right here.
How did it go? It was good?
It was good. Like, you know, like Fazia said, you couldn't see what I was cooking all that well, so I'll rethink the next class that I do.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to add the garlic. The onions are just about soft enough. You want them to be soft, but you don't want them to start getting too brown. Mine are getting just a tiny bit brown, which is fine. If they start to brown too much, you want to turn the heat down just a little bit, because we're going to do a low and slow, because we're going to be cooking the squash for about 10 minutes. But I'm adding the garlic now. We're just going to cook that for a couple minutes, and then we're going to add the squash and the thyme and the salt and pepper. I'm so curious to know how the people who are not in Olympia found out about this class. Did you used to live in Olympia and then you were still on the co-op mailing list or social media, or how did that happen?
In my case, I was on Eventbrite and they had a list of courses that you could take that were free.
Oh, that's so cool. So you just found it through Eventbrite?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I've also signed up for quite a few other ones. So it's great.
That's so cool. All right, so I'm just using, oh, and I can't quite see the chat. Somebody says they're from Lacey. Eventbrite. Great. So I'm just using this thyme. We sold this in our bulk spice section at the co-op. And just want to double check the, we're putting in 1.5 teaspoons of thyme. You also could play around with other spices. I think thyme and squash taste great together. But you could take this, I mean, you could use cumin or you could use garam masala. You could use some cinnamon, depending on, you know, what kind of flavors you want to go for.
One of my favorite combinations with squash is sage.
Oh yeah, sage would be really good. So I'm just I put in the thyme, and then I'm putting in the salt and pepper, and then I'm going to put in the squash. And I just want to talk about the squash a little bit. So I'm using cubed delicata, and I'm going to try to get it close to the camera. Can you see the size of that? I cut it up pretty small. As I said in the recipe handout, I made this the first time with, you know, a squash that I peeled and chopped, and I thought it was delicious. And then I tried it twice with frozen cubed squash, mostly because I have some family members who have arthritis, and it's really hard for them to peel and chop squash. And I've had shoppers say that too, that handling a squash can be a little daunting. And so I really wanted for this recipe to work using frozen squash. And it does work, but it's really not as good. So if you have someone who could help you chop a squash, if that's not something you're comfortable doing, I recommend it, but you can make it with frozen squash. The main issue that I found was that it gets a little bit mushy. And so you would want a little more texture. So if I was going to use frozen squash again, after it was done cooking, I would stir in maybe a half cup of chopped nuts to give it a little bit of texture. Okay, so we're going to let this cook for 10 minutes. And while that's happening, we're going to make the kale that goes with it. All right, so I'm going to move the camera again, so bear with me for just a sec. Oh my gosh, I hope all of you teach cooking classes too. Since they're free and on Eventbrite, it would be so cool if we could all just attend each other's cooking classes and learn lots of new stuff. Okay, so I'm going to zest and juice this lemon. If you've never used a zester like this, it is such a worthwhile tool to invest in. You can usually get these at discount home goods stores like Marshall's. And it just makes zesting a lemon so easy. So you just lay it across the bowl like that. And then you just grate it. You can also use a box grater if that's what you have. It just takes a little bit more time and you have to watch your fingers. I zested most of this lemon earlier, so this won't take too long. While I go get the juicer, I'm going to give the squash a little stir. What other classes have people taken on Eventbrite or on other platforms?
My daughter for Christmas bought me banjo lessons from one of my favorite banjo teachers. So I'm taking banjo lessons on Eventbrite.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. I have not dived into the world of free online classes yet, but I want to, or even paid online classes. I just dropped a little lemon seed in there, so I'm just pulling that out. So when you do this, check and make sure you don't get any seeds in there. Someone commented in the chat, diabetic plant-based cooking class. And someone said, this is my first class. And someone else said it's their first class too. Cool. Okay, so once you get your lemon zest and your lemon juice in your bowl, you're gonna grab your kale. I'm using lacinato kale. That's the kale that I think works the best in this recipe. But if you had some other green, you could use it. It'll just get softer. Lacinato, I'll show that to you in case you're not familiar with it. So lacinato is the kale that looks like that. It's dark green. I've just chopped it into fine ribbons. So we're just going to put that in with the lemon juice and zest. And I'm going to wash my hands again, and then I'm going to massage the kale. Lemon helps the kale soften up a lot. And so if you have never made kale salad, the technique of massaging it really gets the acidity into the kale leaves and helps it soften. Let's see, there's something else in the chat here. Oh my gosh, someone's from San Diego, California. And they've taken Zumba and taken guitar. Oh, that's so cool. Okay, yeah. So if you wanted to make a basic kale salad, the only thing that would be different than what you're doing here is you'd be putting in olive oil and salt as well. But this technique where you're just really rubbing the acidity into the kale gives it a nice flavor and helps it get really soft. And the zest is so good in this recipe. It really comes through. You'll taste it when you make it. So we're just gonna let that sit. We're gonna give the squash another stir. It's probably pretty close. Sorry, I'll turn the camera so you can see what I'm doing again. I'm just checking the squash out. You'll see that it's kind of beginning to get brown on the outside, little nice brown bits. And the onions and garlic are getting nice and browned. It smells great. Okay. And so just to remind you, the pie is going to be in the oven for about a half an hour. And so the squash is going to have about a half an hour in the oven. So it's going to get soft in the oven. So you don't need to worry about it being soft in the pan. You just want it to sort of have started the cooking process.
Erin, should we preheat our ovens at this point or in a little bit?
I totally forgot. Yes, please preheat your ovens. And then what I'm going to have us do, I'm going to go ahead and preheat your ovens now. Yes. And then I'll tell you what's next.
Erin, is there another substitute that you could use in place of the squash for those that don't like squash all that much, like maybe a parboiled potato or some other type of vegetable?
I think you could totally do that. Yeah, I think that any sort of dense root type of vegetable, like a yam would probably work too. A potato would probably work. Yeah, potato would probably be delicious. And this recipe was my first venture into using phyllo. And when I had it, I was like, oh my gosh, I want to put everything in this because it's really simple and good. Okay, is everybody preheated who wanted to do that? So I think what we're going to do next is move on to the next step of the recipe. And then I'm going to give us a 10-minute break just for everyone to sort of like reconnoiter if they're cooking and give me a chance to sort of tidy up and have us be on to the next thing. So after your squash and onions have browned, you're going to turn your burner off. And then you're going to put them into a mixing bowl. So you're just going to transfer all of that into a mixing bowl. And you guys can't see me because I moved off camera. Let me come back. Sorry. It's really weird doing this on the computer instead of doing it in person where you're all sitting here with me and you can see it. But the advantage is we have people from all over the place, which is so awesome. That makes me so excited. Our little tiny town here. In the bowl, you're going to mix in the eggs and the Parmesan. So 2 eggs. And one of the times I made this, I was sort of distracted and I forgot this step and I put the squash into the phyllo and then I had to pull it all out and try to like not mess up the phyllo. So don't forget this step because you need those eggs in there. Great, and we're just gonna grab some Parmesan. Half cup, so I'm just gonna estimate that. I'm just gonna throw in about a half cup. And then we're just gonna mix it up with a wooden spoon. The eggs should just mix right into the squash. You can see that happening. Great. And then we're just going to set this aside. And like I said, let's take a 10-minute break and I'm going to wash out my cast iron pan and just tidy up a little. People can go use the restroom or get a drink of water or whatever. So I will see you back here. I don't have a clock on there. Let's see. At 6:55. Okay. I just saw the comment about being able to lift the cast iron pan. That is so funny. It's a small cast iron pan, so it's not actually very heavy.
Well, you are inspiring nonetheless.
Thanks. Yeah, I used to really want a bigger cast iron pan. And then I used one a few times and they're so heavy, the really big ones, that I prefer to use. I think mine is a 9-inch pan, and it's just about the right size for me. If anybody who's not taking a break right now has any questions, this would be a good time. We just have a couple of minutes left before we all get back together. And it's okay if not.
Hi, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So the eggs plus half cup of parmesan,
Yes.
is it a separate recipe of the recipe which is cubed squash, or is it combined? It's going to be added to the same recipe.
Oh, this is all for the same recipe.
Okay.
Yeah, so so we're about to assemble the pie. And so you mix the eggs and the Parmesan in with the squash. And then what we're going to do is sort of build a little stack inside of the phyllo pastry. We're going to lay it in the pan, and then we're going to put the squash in and the kale on top of it.
Okay.
And then we're going to decorate the top of it with lots of other tasty things.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes, thanks for the question. And also any feedback people have about pacing, what you'd like to see differently next time. Like I said, this is my first time teaching an online class. So feedback is helpful to me so I can do them better in the future. I'm used to doing these in person, you know, like I said, where we do a lot of chit chat, but it's a little different online. So. Mm-hmm.
So at this point, Erin, we have the squash, eggs, and Parmesan in one bowl, and then the lemony kale in another bowl.
Correct.
Did you add any salt to the kale or just the lemon?
Just the lemon.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to be putting goat cheese and olives in the pie as well. And the olives are quite salty. So I'm using less salt than I normally would if I wasn't putting olives in it. So if you don't like olives and you don't want to put the olives in, that's a really good question, Monica. You would want your squash and your kale to be a little saltier. So you would want to add that. If you don't like olives, you could also, this is going to sound weird, but I think it would taste good. You could try adding dried fruit. So raisins or dried apricots could be really interesting. It's just nice for it to have, the olives give it a really sort of special, sort of succulent kind of deliciousness that was really surprising to me. And the recipe calls for Kalamata olives, and that's what we're going to be using tonight. But pitted green olives would probably be good too. They would just have a different flavor. So, and I always say this in my cooking classes, eat what you like. So if there's something, and the question about potatoes was really good for people who don't like squash. If there's something similar that you like, use that instead. Recipes are just sort of a roadmap of how to get to a place. So I use recipes a lot for oven temperatures, how much salt to add. You know, if I'm baking, you want measurements for the flour and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of flavoring, eat what you enjoy, you know? So like if you love orange, you could make that avocado pudding with orange extract, you know, like the point is for you to be cooking food and creating things that feel delicious and special to you that you can share with other people or just enjoy for yourself. You know, so I always say my recipes are just a guide, and really like what you like is what you will like the best. Okay, so let's go ahead and assemble the pie now. So we're using, this is, I don't know if you can see, oh, it's upside down, sorry. This is frozen phyllo dough. And so I took this out and had it out overnight in the fridge. And then I took it out 2 hours ago to get it sort of close to room temperature. I'm going to open that up. This stuff is very delicate. And it comes in these big sheets. It always makes me nervous because it feels like a really special thing. And I'm opening it up. So we're just gonna need to get 4 pieces out of here. And so you have to just kind of gently unfold it. You want to be careful because it's pretty easy for it to crack. And this top one's split in half, so I'm just going to pull that one off. They come in these really thin, fine sheets. I don't know if other people have used it before. I had never used it. They look like that. So we're just going to lay that in the pan. And you do not want to oil the bottom of your pan. You want to oil the bottom piece of the phyllo, but I oiled the bottom of the pan the first time I made it, and it made the phyllo stick to the pan. So you don't want that. So I'm using oil and a pastry brush, and I'm going to tilt this down so you can see what I'm doing. People see that? So the sheet of phyllo is just in the pan, and I'm just going to brush olive oil on it. Mine got a little tiny crack in it, but I'm just going to kind of mush it back together. Okay, and then you're just going to put another piece right on top of that one. So you should have, the phyllo should sort of be hanging over the edge of whatever you're going to be cooking in. Of the pan. So we're just pushing that down in there. Can you see that okay? So that's number,
Yes.
okay, good. That's number 3, and then we're going to put in number 4. Okay. And then the squash is going to go in first. So you're just going to pour your squash right in the bottom, like that. And then just sort of spread it around. And then the kale's gonna go on top, and I'm gonna grab some tongs. So you can use tongs or you can use your hands. What you don't want to do is just dump the bowl of kale into the dough because it has too much liquid in it. So you want to kind of shake some of the liquid off as you go. Can you see that? Just a little bit. So you're just kind of shaking the lemony liquid off the kale, and then you're laying it on top of the squash. So the first time I made this, I just dumped it in and it was too runny and it made the phyllo get too wet, which you don't want. All right, then you have your kale on top. And then we're gonna dot the top with goat cheese and olives. And I'm using this fig and honey goat cheese, which I think is delicious, but I've also made it with herbed goat cheese, which was really good. Someone said earlier that they don't really eat goat cheese, and so they were using cheddar instead. You could also use feta, I think would be really good. So what I'm doing here is just breaking off little pieces of the goat cheese, and you want to just sort of top your pie with it. And this is a tip I'll share that I didn't do today, and I'm regretting it. If you keep your goat cheese in the refrigerator until you're ready to use it, it's firmer and it's a little easier to work with. It gets pretty soft at room temperature.
Erin, when I shopped for ingredients, I saw that beautiful honey goat cheese and I really wanted it, but I was like, oh, it might make the pie taste weird or too sweet. So I'm excited to see that you're using that.
I think it tastes great. Yeah, I really like it. So I usually use about 3/4 of a package of goat cheese, like one of these little, I think it's a 4-ounce log. You can use more or less depending on how much you love or don't love cheese. I love cheese, so I use a lot. And then we'll put the olives on. So these are pitted Kalamata olives. And again, you know, the recipe says 24. You can use however many you like. And you just want to spread them evenly on top, okay? And again, like as I'm putting them on, I'm kind of shaking the liquid off of them. And this pie, definitely if you're serving it to other people for a special dinner, you want to serve it hot so that the phyllo is nice and crispy and brown. It loses its crispiness over time as it's refrigerated. But it's super delicious as leftover breakfast or lunch. So I live alone. And so when I've made this, you know, this is a lot for one person. And so I take it for lunch all week, which is nice. Okay, that looks good. Okay, so now what we're going to do is brush each layer of the phyllo with oil. And if you wanted to be really decadent, you could use melted butter, but I'm using olive oil here. When I made it for my mom to practice, and she was like, "Oh, I bet you could use butter." I was like, "Yeah, I bet you could." So we're just gonna, again, we're just brushing the layers with the oil. And brushing with the oil, I didn't do this the first time I made it because I didn't have a pastry brush. And I tried using spray oil and it just didn't work that great. If you don't have a pastry brush and you don't want to buy one, I used to use paint brushes that came in sets that I had never used before. I just like appropriated one for cooking. So you don't have to use a legitimate pastry brush, basically just anything you can brush the oil on with. I just don't find the spray oils to be very easy to use personally. Maybe I need one that I don't know, has a different nozzle or something. Okay, so after you brush the oil on, you're just gonna fold it over. And then you're gonna brush oil on the top side too. And it's okay, by the way, if it's cracking a little bit. It's just gonna look like a nice little package when it's all folded up. And it's okay if it's not perfect. Mine has never come out perfect, but it comes out delicious and it looks pretty and cool. So.
Hey, Erin, can I share a money saving hack about spray oil?
Yeah.
So in the kitchen at the co-op, Siobhan buys us glass spray bottles that we can put oil into, you know, because we get the big old jugs of oil and they're more economical. And the spray oil is so expensive, and so we just put oil into our own spray bottles.
And does it work pretty well?
It works great, and you can choose whatever kind of nozzle you want, you know, if you want a spray or if you want a more direct stream. Or
I tried using, I had like a little plastic toiletry bottle, but it didn't work. Like the oil wouldn't really come out. Okay, so I'm on my last layer here and I'm just brushing it. And then we're gonna fold it over. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not on my last layer. I have one more after this.
I also wanted to show you all my kitchen intern. Can you see him? He's very interested in cooking. He loves the kale stems.
What's his name?
Scrappy.
Aw, Scrappy.
And he keeps the floors very clean.
That's handy. Oh my gosh, I hope you all make this pie and love it so much. I really enjoy it. It's unique. It's sort of an unusual dish. And the deal with making the two other dishes that are simple, when I cook a fancy meal for someone, I like to make one dish that's kind of complicated and takes a lot of time, and two other dishes that taste good, but are not hard to make. I definitely have been guilty of trying to do too many complicated recipes at once, and it really stresses me out. And when I'm having someone over for dinner and I want to cook them a lovely meal, I do not want to be stressed out. I want to be excited and joyful and relaxed and happy to share food. And I know some people love like challenge and high level cooking, and that's totally cool too. But for me, I like to do one sort of involved dish and two really simple ones.
I really like that idea of yours. I go along with it.
Right? Like it's no fun if you're making dinner, like a nice
You are so
dinner.
exhausted by the evening, so.
Yeah. Okay, so my pastry is all folded over and brushed, and you can see it's not perfect. It has some cracks, but it's pretty good. So we're gonna put it in the oven now. I'm gonna start by putting it in for 25 minutes. I am gonna check it because right now I live in a tiny house that has a propane oven. And so I've been cooking it in that, and it's been taking about a half an hour. But I'm not sure about this oven that I'm using tonight. So we'll check it after 25 minutes and see. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop it in the oven.
Okay, here's mine.
Hey, look, beautiful. Look at
But
that.
it's all cracked up.
It looks great. Are you, Monica, are you almost there with yours? Yeah, look, beautiful.
I'm still on the folding part. I'm a little behind.
That is all right. I'm gonna quickly set the timer on my phone because I can't figure out how to set the timer on that oven. I'll be right back. I decided to set my timer for 22 minutes just to be on the safe side. With the phyllo dough, obviously a lot comes in a package, so you want to wrap it back up in plastic and you can put it back in the freezer until you're ready to make your next thing. And for anybody who made the chocolate mousse, you can go ahead and take that out of the freezer and you can just leave it in the fridge. We're going to make the garbanzo bean salad next. While the pie is cooking, we're going to make the garbanzo bean salad and decorate the avocado mousse. I'm just going to take a sec to tidy up this area and then bring the ingredients for the third dish over. Monica, have you used spray oil with phyllo before?
No, I haven't. I wasn't even suggesting to do it. I was just thinking about it as a really nice cost saver, but I've always brushed it on. I think you're right. I think that's the best way to do it.
I don't know. I mean, the recipe that I adapted this from said you could use spray oil. And it's a little faster, but it just didn't really work for me.
It does seem like it would save you some time, but there's something kind of satisfying about brushing it on too.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so I'm going to bring the ingredients for the garbanzo salad over.
Erin, do you put your pie kind of in the top half of the oven, the middle, the bottom half?
I usually put it in the middle.
Nice.
Okay. You look like you're almost there, Monica. Is that true?
Yeah, I got the pie in the oven.
Oh, sweet. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started then with the garbanzo bean salad.
Don't wait for me. I'm good at keeping up in my mind.
Awesome. Does anybody have any questions before we move on? Comments or anything that was familiar or unfamiliar?
Yeah, I have one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you heat the lemon and kale mix?
No, you don't heat it. It just goes in cold, but it gets cooked in the oven inside the pie. Like what will happen is a lot of steam is created from the squash cooking. And so it'll also cook the kale.
Okay. Yeah, when you are mixing in the this stainless steel bowl, it looked to me like you are cooking on the stove. So that's why.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Nope. I'm just on a counter right here. So I was just mixing it up in a regular mixing bowl. So you don't cook it. No.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? No? Okay. So the next recipe could not be simpler. It is a garbanzo bean salad. I've also made, when I've made this pie, a white bean salad. So you could do, this one has cumin and balsamic and lemon juice and tomatoes and green onions and parsley. But I've also made one with basil and more like Italian herbs. So any bean salad goes really well with this. And the reason we're making a bean salad with this is because the pie doesn't really have much protein in it. And so in order to make this a more filling meal and a meal that has protein in it, I like to serve a bean salad on the side. Bean salads are super easy to make. You could make it the day before and it'll still be really delicious. And in fact, sometimes the flavors meld better and get more developed as a few days go on. One thing I'll caution you about, I'll just raise this up while I'm talking. If you are making a bean salad and you're adding vegetables to it, if they're really soft vegetables like cucumbers, they can get sort of gross over a few days. So think about that when you're deciding what to put in your bean salad. Tomatoes are usually okay for a day or two, but I wouldn't really stretch it beyond that. But there's tons of recipes for great bean salad. So whatever appeals to you, you could try out. I bet a curried bean salad would be really tasty with this pie as well. I like this one because it's a little sharp with the vinegar and lemon juice. So it makes it a little tart, which is nice. So I'm just going to use a plain can of garbanzo beans. I do like to drain them and rinse them. So I have a little tiny colander that I use for that. And you want to give it time for the water to drain. So what I usually do is rinse and drain the beans and then make the dressing while that's happening, and then you can mix it all together. So I'm just going to go over to the sink and do that.
And Erin, did I hear you say that you can refreeze the phyllo?
Yeah. Yeah, as long as it's all wrapped up, you can wrap it back in the plastic and put it back in the box and just put it back in the freezer.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna do the dressing. So when you're making dressings, on here, it says to just add it all together, but I'm gonna give you a tip. Dressings emulsify better if you put the acid in the bowl before you put the oil in the bowl. So we're gonna put in the vinegar and the lemon juice and the cumin and the salt and pepper in first and whisk those together. And then we're going to slowly add the olive oil. And I also want to just say a note about balsamic dressings. Here, I'll put this down here so you can watch what I'm doing. I accidentally bought a different balsamic than I usually buy. And it was extremely sweet and syrupy, which is great for salads, but it wasn't good for this recipe. So just, if you haven't bought balsamic vinegar before, you're looking for one that's pretty acidic, not one that's sweet. If you didn't have a lemon, or if you didn't want to buy another lemon, you could use more balsamic and omit the lemon. I like the little bit of tartness that the lemon gives though. So we're going to use half of a lemon. Sorry, I'm looking for my lemon zester. Okay, sorry, here I am.
I bet that would be good also with canned lentils.
Yeah, that probably would be really good too. Any like bean or lentil type of protein to serve with this would be good.
And I also find when I make a vinaigrette, if I put a tiny bit of Dijon mustard in it, that will emulsify the vinegar and the oil really well.
Yes, thank you. That's a great tip. Okay, so we have the lemon juice and the balsamic. I'm going to put in a 1/4 teaspoon of salt and a little bit of pepper, and then the cumin. I don't know if people cook with cumin much. I love it. I think it's one of the key spices for vegetarian cooking. It has such a distinctive flavor, and it's so good in dressings. And a half. But you have to be a little careful not to overdo it because it can turn out a little bit bitter if you use too much.
What spice are you talking about, Erin?
Cumin,
Ah,
but it can be a little bitter if you use too much, but I think in the right proportion, it's a really delicious spice for vegetarian cooking. Okay, so we just have those things of the acid. So we have the balsamic, the lemon juice, salt and pepper and cumin, and we're just gonna whisk those together. And then we're gonna slowly add our oil. And as one of the participants said, adding Dijon mustard is also really delicious in dressings. And another thing you can do, not for this salad, but just for salad dressing, is putting a little bit of jam is really delicious for dressings. Let me grab my olive oil. We're going to use 3 tablespoons of olive oil. So I'm just going to measure them out a tablespoon at a time and then slowly add them. And we're going to whisk as we're adding it. And the idea is that that joins all the components of it together so the oil and the vinegar don't separate. The other thing this salad is really good in, it's really good in a wrap for lunch. So if you get a big tortilla and you put this salad in it and then put a little bit of cabbage for crunch, it's super tasty. Okay, so we have our dressing made. I'm gonna go grab the garbanzo beans from the sink. We're gonna pour those in. And then I have half a pint of cherry tomatoes here that I chopped. We're gonna pour those in. And then I have parsley and green onions that I chopped up. We're gonna pour those in. And we're just gonna stir it all together and taste it. Oh, I really wish you were all here. Like one of the most fun parts of the class, and obviously we can't do this now because of COVID, but we used to make all the food and then have people grab plates and come around and get little tastes of it. And sometimes it would be like having an actual dinner. It was nice. Just gonna grab a fork and taste that.
No, that already looks so delicious.
What does?
It looks so delicious, the green and the parsley and the onion. Yep.
Oh my God, it's so good. It's good, and the olive oil, this dressing has kind of a lot of olive oil in it. It makes it very rich tasting. but also light and acidic because of the lemon juice. So good. So good. Okay, that turned out great. I'm gonna go open the oven and just take a peek at the pie and make sure it's doing okay. And if it's still baking, which I think it still has a while to go, we're gonna decorate the avocado mousse. So I'll be right back. So I just looked at my pie and it's getting pretty close. It's definitely starting to brown on top, which is what you want to see. My timer still has 6 minutes on it, and I think it'll be okay for that amount of time. But I think I want to check the recipe and see how long I said for it to bake, because I think in a non-propane oven, yeah, this says 30 to 40 minutes. So I want you all to change your recipe sheets and write 25 to 30 and check them after 25. This is my first time baking it in an actual normal oven.
So mine has really gone brown on top. So I kind of put a sheet of foil to cover it so it doesn't start to burn.
Good. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, and the squash is cut small. So once it's been in the oven for about 20 minutes, that's usually plenty of time for a squash. So I think if it's starting to brown, it's okay to take it out. I'm going to look at mine again.
Okay, thank you.
And one thing I'll say, mine needs a little bit longer. You definitely want it to be brownish on top. When I've taken it out too soon, the phyllo isn't crispy. And so that's what the browning does. It makes it nice and crispy. So you do want it to look brown, and I'll show it to you when mine's done.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So now we have the mousse. It's nice and firm. It was in the freezer. And you want to save this step until right before you serve it. And so what I usually do is decorate the top in a fancy way with fruit. And I like to lay it so it's all going in the same direction. So just sort of thinking about when you're making a special dinner for someone, the presentation is important. And so thinking about what sort of design you want it to have. And so I often will try to create the look of like a flower on top of it. So I'll show you. It's probably hard to see. So I would be inclined to do something like, and I actually wish we had raspberries. I love how raspberries taste with this, but they're not in season, at least not here in Olympia. And strawberries aren't really either, but they looked a little better and we had them. But like I said before, I think I said this already, if you don't have any seasonal fruit available, so that's what I did. You can see, you just kind of lay it in a sort of deliberate way so that it looks pretty. And then I'm going to chop some nuts and sprinkle it in the middle and just a few on top of the strawberries. But what I was going to say is if fresh fruit is not in season where you are, you could use a little bit of toasted coconut and nuts on top would be really good. You also could probably use frozen raspberries or blackberries would probably taste good. Yeah. I'm just looking for a knife right now to chop the nuts with. And somebody wrote in the chat, I didn't see this before, I love to add cumin, both whole or ground, to vegetarian chili. Heating the spices in oil before adding other ingredients releases their flavors. Yes, thank you. What a good tip. Okay, so these nuts that I'm using are so good. They're tamari almonds, and that little bit of salt will give a lovely flavor on top of this chocolate pudding. But it's also really good. I've used hazelnuts before, is really good. Just gonna sprinkle those in the middle. And a few around the edges. I'm excited to be making these. I'm gonna leave these for the staff who work here, who were here at Grub when I got here and let me into the building. So I'm excited for them to get to taste it. So I just kind of did that. So I put the nuts in the middle so it looks more like a flower.
That's such a good idea, Erin. They're gonna love that.
Yeah, I think it'll be a nice little treat for them. So I'm just gonna go ahead and decorate the other one.
I love your idea of when avocados have gone brown, you can make them into chocolate avocado mousse. That's what I'm going to do next time.
Yeah, because it's so disappointing, you know, because they're expensive. And when you buy them and they're no good, it makes me so grumpy if I feel like I have to compost them. And it's nice to be able to use them. You know, I've tried making guacamole with brown avocados and like, you just don't want to eat it, right? It's just not very appealing.
Oh yeah, definitely you want the bright green for the guacamole.
Yeah. Okay, great. Those are both decorated. I am going to rinse my hands and then I'm going to turn my timer off and take that pie out of the oven. I'm just grabbing my little, if you don't have one of these cast iron pan that fits right on the handle are so handy. You can see by the look of mine, I've burned it a few times. Oh, it smells so good. Okay, it's done. So I want to show you what mine looks like. You all see that? The lighting is not that good, is it? You can't really see it that well, but it's nice and brown. Gosh, I wish I could get a better view. Let me try moving the camera where there's less glare. Monica, how's that view? Can you see it? Not
You
really.
can see it, but it's hard to see the color.
Let me try
Yeah.
turning.
The camera just kind of washes it out.
Let me see if I turn that light off, if you can see it. Not really, huh?
Oh yeah, that's very brown.
Better,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, what you want is for the pastry, like if you touch it, it breaks. So you want it to be nice and crispy on top because you want it to have that crunch. You don't want it to be soft and soggy. But you kind of have to keep an eye on it in the last minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and you want to let it cool for a little while. I usually let mine cool for about 10 minutes before I cut it, but I want to cut into it and show you what it looks like inside. Oh, it's glorious. It's so crunchy.
I can hear it crunching.
Can you hear it crunching?
Yeah.
Mine.
Fazia, that's beautiful.
I want to see.
I just got it out.
Oh, look how pretty. Look how beautiful it is.
You can see
It
your
was going
color.
round too fast, so I kind of covered it a little bit.
Yeah, it looks gorgeous. I got mine in a little later, so it's getting there really, really fast, but not quite yet.
All right, I'm going to grab a plate. If you let it cool just a little, it'll hold together a little better. Just want to show you what the inside of it looks like. And I'm going to taste it. It's delicious. It's really good. The squash is nice and tender. It's very, very bright tasting from the lemon juice. And then it has a nice cheese, both flavor and texture from the goat cheese, as well as the olives. Oh, it's so good.
Well, I think I love the colors.
Yeah, it's really pretty inside too. Well, everyone, that's everything I have to cook. Does anybody have any questions or comments or anything?
Erin, I would just love to say that I have never personally cooked with phyllo dough. I'm a little intimidated, but after seeing you do it, I am inspired and no longer afraid. So this was super helpful. Thank you.
Yay, I'm so glad. I totally felt that way about it too, Marcy. Like it seemed really complicated when in fact it's like instant fanciness is kind of how it feels. So I'm just going to read the comments. Great job. Thanks for hosting this class. This was a great class. Thanks so much. And really, if you have any feedback about ways we can improve, Monica, you sent the stuff out to participants. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, so you can send feedback to Monica and she'll share it with me. Obviously, I think I would want to have a sous chef with me next time to do the sort of cleanup and move around so I can stay more engaged with you the whole time. But it was a super fun experiment and trying this out for the first time. And what a joy to have so many people here and people from here and people from elsewhere. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for joining me tonight.
Great job,
Thank
Erin.
you.
Great job on the time, making 3 dishes in less than 2 hours.
Yeah, it turned out pretty well. Here's some more comments. I really enjoyed your cooking. You explained each step very well. Thank you. And then another thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Okay. I hope your pie turns out delicious, Fausia.
Yeah, I can bring some for you to taste it on Thursday.
Oh, I would love to.
And for Monica.
Oh, thank y'all.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Hey, Monica.
Hey, good job.
Thanks. Did it
I
seem
loved it. I got all the comments, so I'm gonna put them. I grabbed them.
okay to you? Like,
Oh
do you
yeah, it was really fun. It was really fun. You were so prepared. I did all my cooking, as I did it, and same with tonight. I didn't have time to prep, so I just cooked but yeah, I think it's interesting. I expected everybody to cook along with me, and I think most people are more comfortable just watching and then trying it on their own.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's what I would want to do as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little fast paced, but I'm a fast chopper these days.
Well, you work in the deli a lot, right?
I do.
Yeah.
You know, we chop entire cases of kale. What do you
Right.
think? Is that done?
I think it's pretty close. My squash could be like a tiny bit more tender.
So I could put it in a little longer.
You might want to foil it and put it in just a little bit longer.
Ooh, it's sizzling. It sounds so good.
Mmm. That tastes so good. I love this dish.
Look at my mousses.
Yummy.
Yeah, I put nuts and frozen raspberries on top.
Nice. Cool. Well, I hope you have a great evening. Thank you for encouraging me to do this. I was really nervous.
Oh, I'm so glad you did it. You're such a good natural trainer, you know, and I loved how you asked questions and engaged people. And I love that there were people from all over the country here. That's just the
So
coolest.
cool. So cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. That's like a real advantage to using Eventbrite, right?
Yes, yeah, it really does do some promotion for you. When I first started my class, you know, most of the people had their cameras off, and I felt really intimidated by that.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that you were just like, whatever you want to do is fine. And having, you know, just a couple people cooking along with me made all the difference.
Yeah. I agree. Like if nobody was cooking along with me, that would have been a little awkward. So maybe we can support each other and like go to each other's classes.
It's super helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, just having a couple people that I could like look at and say, how's that go? You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Boy. And what was the other thing I was gonna say? Oh, I forgot. But yeah, I think you did really well. Oh, I was gonna tell you, I just felt like so exhausted afterwards. Like
After
I
teaching.
was like the
Yeah.
cheerleader, you know? It's just like,
It makes you really tired. I know teaching a class is like, and then, you know, you have to like psych yourself up and do it. And then you have to clean up. It is like, it makes you tired.
yeah.
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 All right. Well, speaking of that, I'm going to get to it.
Nice. Well, thank you again.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can figure out how to put these on the internet and people can enjoy them forever.
Cool. Thanks.
All right,
Melissa.
Erin.
Okay.
Thanks. Can't
Bye.
wait to eat my pie.
Okay. Take care. Bye.
Bye.